a big sign for Biden. Right now in Michigan, we see Trump leading. I wouldn't read too much into that. That's because they count mostly the of the day votes. Those favor Trump. We're going to see early voting counted later. And it might not be tonight. It might not be tomorrow before we get those Cleveland votes. Wisconsin is another vote, another state that we need to watch. That is one that Trump won very narrowly, breaking up the blue wall. All of those states were states that Barack Obama won. They called it his Democratic blue wall. This year, it's looking very different. But if Trump loses Ohio, his path to victory narrow dramatically. He won by 36 electoral votes last time. This would be 18 of those votes. And Biden appears to be outperforming Hillary Clinton in several places across the nation.
Thank you for that. Let's now go to Christine Salumi. Crucial battleground states of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan. All those up for grabs today. Christine, you are in Philadelphia looking at Pennsylvania. In 2016, of course, Trump narrowly won Pennsylvania with less than 1 percentage point. How are things going to look in 2020?
Yes, well, Democrats are hoping that they were able to rally suburban women, minority voters, particularly Black and Latino voters, and also some disaffected Republicans to avoid a repeat of 2016 when Hillary Clinton was leading in the polls, much like Joe Biden has been. But President Trump was able to pull off an upset victory, winning by less than a percentage point. And it may take a while, however, for all the votes to be counted here in this crucial battleground state. And that's because they've only just begun processing some 2.5 million mail-in ballots because state law required them to wait until today to begin that process. They say they're going to do it as quickly as possible. The governor has just been speaking about that. But they say it could take as long as Friday. That, of course, could favor Democrats in the end. If there's a lot of votes outstanding, it could look good for President Trump by the end of the day because it's expected that the early votes would favor President Trump, whereas the mail-in votes would favor Joe Biden. Nearly 3 times as many mail-in ballots were requested by Democrats and received from Democrats than they were from Republicans. And right now, only about 15% of the vote is in, and Joe Biden is actually doing very well here, but it's way too early for those percentages to mean too much, given all of that. But clearly, the candidates have been very focused on Pennsylvania. They've been here more than any other state. President Trump was here 13 times. Joe Biden was here 16 times. As recently as a few hours ago, he showed up here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the state's largest city, and he was making an appeal to Philadelphia. He really needs voters in urban areas that favor him strongly to come out. He needed them to come out. And certainly we saw a lot of engagement from voters here. But again, it may be a while before we know for sure how it turned out.
Christine, thank you. Christine Salumi in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, so far, the polls have closed in a number of states. Results are what they're expected to be so far, but we could be in for a surprise in Texas. Heidi Castro is in Houston for us. Heidi, what's the latest from there?
Well, Foley, it is still too close to call here in Texas, which in itself is surprising. Typically, by this time of the night on election night, the U.S. network would have said that Texas is solidly red in favor of the Republican presidential candidate. But what we're seeing here is that this very close results thus far, with some 60% of votes being reported. And Trump is edging ahead by a mere some 1,300 votes at last check. Of course, this is still early in the night, so we're still expecting some of the border counties and El Paso County to be reporting their results later. They are the last polls to have closed, and they are Democratic leaning. So certainly there's still a fighting chance here for Joe Biden, which is a highlight in itself for Democrats. We saw that this first time in a long time, Texas being competitive, interpreted as a large voter turnout, especially among the urban cores of Texas and large metropolitan areas and in the suburbs, and in particular, the suburbs surrounding Austin, Texas, flipping blue for the first time, which is a continuation of the trend we've been seeing since 2018 in the midterm elections. So certainly state Democrats are already counting that in itself as a win, and they're still holding out hope, even though political experts are by large part saying that it is very unlikely that Joe Biden wins Texas this year. However, that trend toward turning blue is certainly ongoing as continued demographic changes in this state with more Latinos voting, more young voters voting, certainly tend to favor the Democratic Party.
Heidi Jo Castro in Houston, Texas. We'll have the latest from Texas as soon as more results are coming from there. And as these results are filtering in, there are, of course, still questions about delays, legal issues, court battles. And to talk about this, we have now with us Karen Greenberg in Westchester. She's an author and director of the Center on National Security at Fordham University School of Law. And also with us, John Malcolm, director of the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. Thank you both for being with us. It's already starting to look tense in places like Nevada. And it's been widely reported in the American media over the last few days, John, that President Trump's plan to victory is to create doubt and challenge these results in the Supreme Court. Is that the plan, you think?
Well, I don't think anybody knows what the plan is. It's still very early in the night. No incumbents have lost yet. None of the so-called toss-up Senate seats or swing states have come in yet. And I'm not sure we're going to know who won this election for several days before any lawsuits are filed. Michigan has said that they're going to count their ballots for up to 3 days after the election. North Carolina for up to 9 days after the election. I certainly hope that there is no litigation filed by either the Trump campaign or the Biden campaign. But I suppose in a very close election, that's always a possibility.
Karen Greenberg, are you as hopeful that there won't be any litigation? I mean, we're already starting to see some concerns in places like Nevada and about mail-in ballots.
Yeah, I agree with John that the best case scenario is that there is no litigation. You're right. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of threats, particularly coming from Donald Trump himself, that, he would contest this in court. I'm really hoping it doesn't go that way. I mean, let's look at what's happened today so far. Nothing really unexpected has happened yet. Some of the violence that was expected at the polls did not occur the way so many had been worried, police and others. So I think in a way this election is playing out in a way we can feel a little safer than we did before. I think, as John said, there's been no upsets yet. There's been nothing to let us know really what's going to happen. A lot of the experts said that we'd be able to call this by 9:30 tonight. Doesn't look like that's going to happen, not even close to that. So I still, to talk about a Supreme Court case seems to be
we're still
a little,
far from that, you think?
premature.
But
Yeah.
John, I mean, if there were to be challenges, I mean, how do you go about challenging any election results? You can only challenge the results or demand a recount when there's a narrow result, like we saw in Florida, of course, in 2000. Do you expect a number of states